Hi,
Greetings.
how are y'all
Ooh,
doing?
Good. How are you?
grand.
Good, good. So, how have you been since Tuesday?
Good. Very good. As somebody who meditates frequently to make progress, a lot of progress.
Yeah,
Hmm.
care to share?
Um, I will give you the very shortest version of this because I don't want to commandeer more than like a minute and a half with doing so. But I had this very persistent, characterized voice in me, and it was the voice of the cruelest, meanest, most rejection-based person I met in high school.
Mhm.
And the person who's just like, I hate you, I hate what you strive for, I hate who you are when you're not trying to do things, I just want to watch you burn so I feel better. And that voice has been internalized, has been with me for a very long time. And not last night but the night before, like in the last 24 hours, some such, uh I was confronted by this voice and I just listened to it, like really listened to it for the first time. And I was like, we're going to reparent this. What do you have to say? I'm not avoiding you. I'm not blocking you. I'm not trying to prevent you. What is it you are trying to communicate? And I realized that what it has to say is just hatred.
Mm.
But I was the one who was listening to it because I thought that it might be correct. So in this confrontation, I'm like, hey, you've demonstrated that you don't know me. So go ahead and live in my head. Tell me horrible things any old time. You do that. You do that. If you have to do that, welcome aboard. But I'm not taking you seriously again. That relationship has ended.
Mm. Yeah.
And when that happened, the formula of my psyche went whoop, 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 and reshuffled. And and I was gonna bring this up later, but I guess now's the time and I'll be quick about it. I had a
Yeah.
visual of a version of myself push out from like a wall, and it was a paper mache version of myself. So we're talking like a fully sized puppet of a version of myself that must have been about like a 25-year-old version of myself, something between the teenager and the 34-year-old.
Mhm.
And we're looking at each other in I'm in bed, I'm half asleep, so this is happening in that like inside outside dreamy quasi imposition sort of place, right? I'm looking at this character and they look at me and they say I love you.
Mhm.
And I mean, at the time I was bewildered, but upon reflection I was like, oh, so this paper mache construct version of Dave that I invented to deal with this hyper rejectionist version of Dave that I have been swallowing for so long, I got rid of this and this job ended. So it came to the surface and said, essentially, I love you and thank you for doing the work. And it
Mhm.
left too.
Mm. Wow.
And then I went to bed because that's a lot of work to do at 3 in the morning.
So true. And how you feel today?
I've never felt this good.
Mm. That's beautiful, Dave. That's great. Hang on a second. Um, yeah, let me sit with that one for a second.
It's big.
Yay.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
yeah,
confetti and sprinkles and glitter and sparkles. Amazing.
yeah.
Thank you.
It's what I love the most about that is that extra step. And Lorena, we talked about this too, that pause, and we talked about this on Tuesday, that pause of hang on a second. Let me drop in instead of going,
Mm.
oh, I'm not listening to you,
It
you're being
must not
Na, na,
be
mean.
na, 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 na,
true.
na, na,
Yeah,
na,
yeah.
na, na, na.
Distract, distract.
Yeah.
Yeah. Instead, you went, all right,
Mm.
sit at the table. Let's hear what you have to say. And usually, when bullies get confronted in that way, what you find is great insecurity and absolutely no foundation whatsoever,
Yeah.
except, abject fear
Pain.
and pain and hurt,
Yeah.
right? I think I made this, I told you this, so please forgive me. I'm old, so I repeat myself, but when my son was entering middle school, there was a lot of buzz about you're going to get bullied, you're going to get bullied. So I said, here's what you do if you get bullied. You just say to the bully, do you need a hug? And he thought that was the most hilarious thing. Now, thank God he was never bullied, but
Yeah.
he's online in the gaming community, and there are lots of
Oh,
assholes.
yes. That's
Yeah,
where they live.
Dave, right? And so he actually did have to use that once or twice, and it's like magic. He's like, they just go like, pop, 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 pop,
Oh, you've touched me. I have to run away.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, you're clearly hurting. And I said, you don't do it facetiously. It's sort of like you're clear. The point is you are in pain, but I don't have to take on that pain. And that's what you were saying, Dave.
Indeed.
Yeah. And in fact, by having them sit at the table, at that long wooden table in the cottage, we can give them a place, give them a nice cup of tea, and we end up showing compassion. And what you're doing is you're also impressing in the neural pathways and in collective consciousness, and this is the energy you're putting out, you are in charge. You're at the head of that table. You are the host. You are a guest in my home. You are not the owner of this home.
Mhm.
And as such, you can spew all the venom you want, but I'm not taking it. It doesn't belong to me. It's a
Yep.
facet of me,
Yes.
right? We have to acknowledge the dark as well as the light, but we don't have to let it become our identity. And that's where a lot of people go wrong, understandably, is that they begin to identify with the negative voices in their head. So I love that you calmly asked the question. Yeah, what are you about, buddy? What's the cut of your jib?
Yeah.
And then there you go. So that's beautiful, Dave.
Thank you.
And that you got a good rest after that.
And then I slept pretty good, but
I
actually
bet.
I didn't. I slept very little that night, but I feel like I was supercharged, Like you're camping and you don't sleep more than 4 hours, but you wake up like, we have to hike now. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a really good example of the difference that it makes neurologically when we talk about the vagus nerve and being able to let that flow properly, right? Getting rid of that fucking obstacle with love.
Crimp in the hose.
Yes, the crimp in the hose. I love it. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. Yeah. And by the way, all of you, don't worry about taking up too much time. I'll be in charge of that. And that's what this time is for. Yeah. Beautiful. What do you, any thoughts on that, Lorena, or anything else, anything from your part of the world?
Just that it's epic, that it's so brave to do that it's so courageous to make space for that, something that's so scary. Like it's triggering on one level in terms of, like you're experiencing it as something coming from within, but it's also triggering from previous experiences in your life. And so to have the courage to kind of sit quietly with that and make space with it's pretty epic. Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, I feel like it's been a big week as well. I feel like there's been a lot of stuff bubbling to the surface. There wasn't a lot of time for play. Things feel really, really intense. I've had a bit of a respite from all of the change, but I'm now shifting back into a whole nother cycle of change and moving again. And all of the stuff that brings up. So it's starting to feel, I get that kind of clenching in my solar plexus and tummy, and kind of have to consistently do the double breath and let it go. But and what I'm noticing is in kind of like opening up that, not Pandora's box, but like you have that inner child dialogue, and it's sometimes there, but sometimes I feel like when you open the lid on this to go kind of like a little bit further, there is a calmness in keeping it contained. Right? And keeping it contained, there's a cohesiveness to your life where, yeah, the shit's not working and the same patterns keep popping up, but it's at least kind of stable in that. And what I find is when you kind of start digging into this again, everything just kind of goes woo, and you're never quite sure what's coming from where.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dave. Yeah.
I have a thought. I in the other hat that I wear is a meditation mysticy kind of hat. And something I'd like to offer to what you've just said is that it is scary. It is scary to step into that. But just as a point of comparison, it's probably the scariest it will ever get. And if you're brave enough to say, and now we begin, it has nothing on you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's chaos. It's dropping into the chaos and being calm in the chaos and being okay with not knowing what's coming from where and when and whether you're going to deal with it okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard. But what I've noticed is yesterday, so my husband yelled at me. It happens in relationships. Right. And so he wasn't having a good day. He was like, as Brene says, he was at about 20%, and, he lost his whatever and got grinchy and pinchy. And I was not in a place to be able to kind of hold that. So went on, my inner child basically received that instead of me, who would have said, well, that didn't feel very good. Do you want to try that again? Instead, it was like, ah.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I noticed was that I kind of dropped into it. I was okay. I held on for a bit, and we had to get in the car and go somewhere. And so I sat with her, and it was funny because I heard your voice, Rachel. And I was like, babe, what's going on? This is hard. What's coming up? Right? That was hard. But what was really interesting was the longer I sat with it, right? Because it's like you were talking, Dave, earlier about the voices, right? Like, and you hear that narrative. If you give it an inch, it'll take a yard, and all of a sudden, it's like that narrative that's kind of like spinning all of a sudden. And so, it was like, you're never going to get anywhere, and all of those things that she always says. And I just sat and I listened and I just let it go. And instead of just stopping it and saying, well, we don't need to be doing this right now, that's not helpful, just let it go and just kept saying, what does this feel like? What does this feel like? What is this about? What is this about? Where is this coming from? Yeah. And what eventually bubbled to the surface is us leaving my dad.
Oh.
And my dad disappearing. He didn't disappear physically. He was there every other weekend. But in your 8-year-old brain, he's disappeared. You've gone from having this life of him there on a consistent basis and to, that's interesting. I see the parallel now between change times. Yeah. And so, I was upset and crying, but not in that demonstrative way. I have that passive aggressive way of acting very sullen and sad so you can see how upset I am, instead of just saying, oh, that really hurt, could you fix that?
Mm.
You know, you should see how hurt I am.
Mhm.
But I was sad, just moving through the feelings of it, and that just kept it just kept blooming. Is what it felt like. It's like you take that drop of ink into the water and it just kind of keeps blooming, and it just felt like it kept opening up to this feeling of, it's like tracing that thread. What does that feel like?
Mhm.
Oh, it feels like being abandoned. It feels like hurting. It feels like you being gone. And then all of a sudden, this voice came in my head that said, um, but he didn't go, right? Like, it was like we left him. Your 8-year-old brain didn't understand and made it that he's left. But we left him and he did the best he could with everything that was there.
Mhm.
And so it was just like, I was just left with this sense of peace.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, that talk about bravery and the courage to sit in what is really unpleasant.
Yeah.
If anyone has ever been around a tantruming child, right?
Yeah.
That's not fun. And the last thing you want to do is like, it's like pushing through the screaming and the kicking and like, what's at the core of what all is going on here? It's so unpleasant. But when
Yeah.
we can stay calm, and I love what you said, Lorena, about just rather than asking her to say that's not helpful, don't, what you did was go going deeper with it and asking more questions and, what's that like? And what's that like? That is that step we were talking about in class, where you are allowing the child to feel and saying, it's okay. I've got you.
Mm-hmm.
So you can be as bitchy and as wild and as whatever and as mean as you want. Let me have it because I can take it. I'm the grown up. Right. And that's the difference, is being able to say, this is my very wounded child, and I have to hold him or her close. Right.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, right. And so what ends up happening is over time the tantrum fades, but what the inner child will remember is that you turn toward her instead of away.
Yeah. And you know what felt different this time was that it felt like, I mean, you and I have done inner child work and you've held space for that. And in the meantime, I've held space for that, but it's been a very binary experience, right? So when you and I practiced it, it was very binary. There's you leading and me experiencing as the child in the position. And since then, it has been kind of like I have stepped into the role that you first held for me. So then I took that on in my life on a regular basis. And then it was still very binary. It was, you are the child, we're holding space for this, and it's on and it's off. We're in that experience together in that way, and it starts and then it's over. What was interesting last night was that it was more there was a more of an ebb and flow, and I was both at the same time.
Yes.
It was like I was there with her in the emotion, and she was experiencing the emotion, and I was experiencing the emotion. But then it was me with the intellectual part of it, kind of trying to process like it was like, okay, well, it was almost like a we're now instead. It's like, we're feeling this feeling. What does that feeling feel like from when you were that age? Right. So this feeling feels like whatever he just touched right now feels a lot like something that got touched way back then. So like, what is that? Okay. So then we would drop into the feeling of it so that she could kind of like open that little box into that spot, to that memory, and say, oh, well, that's what it felt like there. Right. So there was this kind of like moving back and forth seamlessly. That was super cool.
Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
the merging that we were talking about on Tuesday,
Yeah.
right? So when we get really good at it, which is kind of what I think you're describing here, Lorena, is the ability to do both at the same time, to feel as the child, to heal as the child, but also as the parent, because the inner child and you are not separate, right? Duh,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right? This is she is you, and Dave, for your inner child, that's you too. And so what's happening is that child did what they had to do to get us to where we are, but they don't know yet that they don't need to fuss so much anymore. Because we kind of went, wow, I'm past that trauma,
Mm-hmm.
like with your dad, right? And then allowing her the space to feel what she's feeling and articulate what she's feeling and feeling it with her. That's how the real healing happens, because you're literally embodying that. And then that allowed you to come to the realization, oh my gosh, my dad didn't leave. We left, but I still felt abandoned,
Mm-hmm.
because the child has no say in whether we stay or go.
Yeah.
All I know is that a parent is missing.
Yeah.
And why didn't you fight more, Dad?
Yeah.
Why didn't you fight to keep me? That you abandoned me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so that poor little girl needs that love, and let her fucking rage.
Yeah. Just confusion. Just
Yeah.
that's what, and if I look at my life, I'd say that the piece that has followed me through is just this confusion around not understanding why things work the way they work. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then you see as it plays out with your husband, right? And then that just kind of the inner child goes, wait a minute, that looks familiar.
Oh, I know that feeling.
I know that feeling. Time for me to activate.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
so I love what you did. And what a blessing too of having the time in the car,
Mhm.
right? And not having to, well, Lorena, you and I have talked about this, and it's amazing how often it comes up in my mind. When there's a conflict between you and someone else, in your case with a partner, the difference it makes to go inward with the conflict, not blaming yourself by any means. That's not what I mean. I mean, by saying, what do I need to do for
Taking
myself?
time to process it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just really, really, and I'm seeing that more and more and more is I'm allowing myself more and more time. And maybe that's that anxious attachment part of me kind of like settling, right? And so I I have the capacity to withstand things being uncertain better. And I'm able to give it space and time, to give myself time to work through it and think through it and process it and have the emotion, instead of moving into the I need to fix this right now. And I'm going to do that by yelling at you.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Which is
yeah.
a very ungrounded place, and a place of just
Gets you nowhere.
reactivity.
Yeah.
And again, yes, it's that attachment stuff. It's the anxious attachment. Like, if I don't stand up for myself, you're going to leave me. And then, so I have to sort this out right now.
Yeah.
And so where was I going with that? Oh yeah. So this idea of saying, not just what is my part in this, but what can I effectively do in this scenario? And it isn't going to be changing him.
No.
That's his bag. Like, he snapped at you.
Hmm.
And when you are able to move through the reactivity that causes, which you did, then you can say, hey,
Yeah.
honey, that didn't feel so good. And more likely than not, he's going to be like, yeah, sorry about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and mostly what I'm noticing is that I don't even need to say the that didn't feel so good part, because he knows it didn't feel so good, and he is aware of how uncomfortable it was, and just apologizes. Yeah.
Right. Because you
Yeah.
guys have also done a lot of work,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, to be fair, over the years. Right. But you can see the cycle it would be if that wasn't in place.
Oh yeah.
Reactivity. And it just ends up being the inner children fighting with each other.
Mhm.
And the grown-ups are going, oh, I'm so tired.
Make
You
it
know?
stop.
Make it stop.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that was your aha moment when we were working together was, oh my gosh, I have a lot more power than I realized.
Yeah.
And that changes
It was
everything.
pivotal. It was paradigm shift. Absolute
Yeah.
paradigm shift in my
Mhm.
world. Yeah.
Absolutely. So again, you know, I want to go back to that sort of dual nature of working with the inner child and being the inner child and being the parent. I guess that's a three-way thing that we do. Is it becomes, it's almost like in spirituality when we talk about non-duality, there's no separation between you and the divine.
Mhm.
But when, you know, but it's a human being praying or meditating or whatever, and then the divine is out there, and what we're doing is we're blurring the lines, we're remembering our self and our connection to the divine. So it's a microcosm of that macrocosm of separation from the divine, which is the source of all pain, by the way. Forgetting that we are part of the great mystery, part of great spirit, is the worst separation that we can experience. So the separation of parent from child, or whatever causes the trauma in the first place, now we're trying to bridge that gap again. So we're merging with the inner child. We're feeling as the child. We are being the parent, and we're being all at once at the same time. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah,
Trinity.
completely.
Tricky.
Yeah.
I don't think I would be able to open the course with that, because it'd be like, huh? You have to
What?
experience it. Yeah, what? That sounds like a lot of fucking work, you know?
Yeah.
But once
Eh.
you have, and it sounds like you both have experienced that, which is great as we enter into the final week of the course, that you know what it's like to merge with your inner child, to feel what your inner child feels, but not own that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Not identify with that feeling, but rather that's when you switch into the parent mode and go, oh, honey, what's going on? Right? What's going on? Talk to me. Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Metaphysical construct that I'm very familiar with is solve and coagule, which is to break apart and to put back together. So when you're talking about, like, you need to remove yourself in order to re-engage with proper footing. I'm like, oh yeah, when you're a big knot, you gotta untangle it and then you can coil the rope, So that's
Mhm.
I'm with you. I'm just agreeing with you from the paradigm that I'm in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and we could apply that to anything. So Dave, doing massage. Speaking of a knot, right? There is a merging that happens between the massage therapist and the body that they're working on, or even just the stuck part of the body, like the knot.
I can speak
You
to that very
Yeah,
quickly
please,
and very
please do.
briefly. Something that I am pioneering, if I was ever going to like write a book about massage therapy, this would be what the book would be about. I call it hypnotic touch. And the idea with hypnotic touch, if you've got a knot and you go in there and you squeeze it, you press it, you rub it back and forth, you bring the fibers, crackly, crackly, crackly pop, you break the knot up. That's very it's almost aggressive. You know, you're manhandling that tissue until it lets go. What I do is I float gently down to the knot, put my fingers on it, and gently press it together and press it apart and press it to the side, press it. You can tell my fingers are barely moving. I'm not breaking this knot up, but what the person on the table does is, oh, and they crunch up and they let go, and the knot goes and lets go, and I don't have to force the tissue to do it.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's a great analogy for inner child work as well. We're approaching gently this part of us, right? And saying, it's okay, honey, I love you. I got you. Go ahead, you rage, you know.
I'm
And
here.
and
I'm
and I
here.
want to speak to the other part because this comes up again too, especially Lorena, your feisty little girl who is so fiercely protective of herself, i.e. you, and says, you're going to fail. This isn't for you. Don't go in a place that's not safe. You know, don't try to do workshops or whatever. People are going to hurt you.
Mhm.
They are not trustworthy. Right?
Yeah, and look, it just happened again. See, if someone loves you can do that, then just imagine what a stranger will do. Yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
Right.
I suggest that people who love you are the ones who will hurt you
Yes.
You always
most
hurt the one you love.
viciously because they feel they have the right to do so.
Yeah.
Well, and you
Well,
actually
it's a
care what
level.
they think.
Yeah, it's a level of comfort. That's what
Yeah.
causes that. It sucks, but it's just true. It's like, you know, hurt people hurt people. So when people are hurt, they feel safe. Like you wouldn't go out and do that to a stranger on the street because you don't know what you're dealing with, but you know and have had enough repair attempts with the person that you love to know this is a safe place for me to be an asshole. And then that happens. But that's a
Yeah.
whole other story. So that's other inner children, right? That
Yeah.
don't play well with yours in that moment. But the point being, when you have a feisty, you know, digging in her heels, you know, the inner child's message in your case leads to either obviously negative self-talk, but imposter syndrome or even self-sabotage.
Hmm.
Like I hope nobody comes to my workshop and then nobody does. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that shit's for real.
Oh my
So
God. I've been watching it play out for, I mean, I started doing acupuncture in 2000. I mean, we're talking about 24 years now. And I would have a sign up sheet at the front of the salon. And then I would spend the whole day hoping that nobody signs up.
right, right. Guilty.
Yeah.
I've done that too. You know,
Yeah.
I used to run classes in here in Nyack and in person long before COVID, and weekly classes. I rented out a yoga studio and I'd be like,
Run you
okay, every
down.
week. And feel like I hope nobody comes. Just nobody comes. And then like two or three people would show up and it'd be like, shit, great.
Oh, here, yeah. Yeah.
Until I got used to doing it. And this is part of that work too, is to say, okay, now I see that's the inner child who's deathly afraid of rejection, deathly afraid of me, you know, making a fool of myself or someone saying, well, what you teach is bullshit. You know, I could get,
Mm.
and I actually had that happen. Now, this is I want to give you this example because this was at the height of my doing this inner work for myself, the inner child work for myself. When I first got certified as a life coach and then as a clinical hypnotherapist, I opened up an office or rented an office in New York City, and all I was doing was hypnotherapy. I wasn't doing anything else. And this woman came in, it was about somewhere in her 50s, early 60s. She, I swear to you, flashed her licensed hypnotherapist card at me, or not licensed, certified, you can't license. And, you know,
Yeah.
it was like dated 1991 or something.
Yeah.
I am a hypnotherapist. So basically, you better wow the pants off me. And she wanted to do a past life regression.
Oh.
And I don't do those. Dave knows because he asked me to do one before we even started working together. I was like, honey, I don't do. But she and I negotiated it, and I said, listen, if you think this will help you, I will. I have, I knew I had a script that I could use, and I would improvise off the script based on what she particularly needed.
Nice.
So she's on the table. She's lying down because it was a massage studio that I was using for hypnotherapy. She's on the table. She's lying down. She's all comfortable. I'm getting into the induction, and she's looking at me out of the corner of her eye every few minutes. She won't go down. She won't let herself relax.
You
And
didn't come here for hypnotherapy.
Yeah, so she saw that I'm using this book, but again, I'm not reading the script necessarily verbatim. I'm improv.
Yeah. Use the book. I don't care.
She sat up and she said, "You don't know what you're doing. If I could read a book by myself and do this for myself." And she got up and stormed out. And she said, "I'm not paying.
Great.
I'm not paying." I blanched. I was so mortified. I felt sick to my stomach. I felt like a fraud. I felt like it's true. I should not be using a script. I went home. I'd threw my scripts away, and I felt just ill. By the time I got back home, there was a phone call from her saying, "I left my sweater in your office. I need to come back and get it. And by the way, I'm sorry. I was very rude and I didn't mean what I said." Now here's the teaching point for me. The damage was done.
Yeah.
It was nice to get her apology, but it didn't make me feel better. It took me at least a year, if not longer, to get over the shame that I felt. And I really had to sit with all of that. The insecurity about doing what I do, about using a script. Am I not good enough? And instead of doing what we all talk about when we do foundation of self work, the one of the first things we talk about is redefining who we are based on what we need, right? So for me, I was somebody not familiar with a past life regression. So I used that as a guide, and that's okay for a lot of people.
Yeah.
It wasn't okay for her. So it took me a while, but that's the inner child saying, you are a failure. You're terrible at what you do. And people are going to call you out on it. See, it just happened.
Yeah.
I'm like, your guides are like, she's at the office. Okay. Lulu in the chamber. Fire the Lulu. Hi, I'm a Lulu and I'm going to ruin your week.
Yeah. But see, then we even think about it, and this helped too. She came to me for a reason. She came to me so I could learn that lesson.
Yeah.
And maybe by the time she got home, she realized, oh shit, I was probably a pawn in somebody else's
game.
Story. Right. Yeah. So when you look at it metaphysically like that, it's like, oh, of course, this was a lesson for me to just be okay with how I do things.
Right, because if your foundation of self had been there and been solid, you wouldn't have cared how she behaved. You would have been like, oh, I'm so sorry you don't recognize the gift I have to offer you. Off you go now, right?
And no, don't pay.
And specifically that how much benefit did to kiss this person on the forehead next time you see them, because all of that was under the ground, and then they were like, boom, and you were like, oh, for a year I'm going to become the strongest human being I've ever been.
Pretty much. So I only share that to show that even when things seem awful and mortifying, when we look at it that way, we say, of course. The Buddhists say, if someone makes you angry, thank them because they've shown you what you need to work on. That's a terrible paraphrase, but that's
well, I mean, and I would always say it to you. Well, if he would just stop doing that, I would be fine. Well, no, I should be fine even if he is doing that. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Biggest gift.
Back to the inner child. So that's what that's about, is to hold space for the inner child without getting caught up in their tantrum. And when they're saying no, 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 that you're able to say, I've got this, right? So that's where like the playing part, which we haven't really talked about today, but being able to play or spend time with the inner child, not just in a therapeutic way, but in a playful way, also helps to create that bond so that they're not poking at you all the time.
Yeah.
Like, oh, if I tell Lorena, this isn't safe, this isn't safe, people are going to make fun of her, they're going to reject her, they're going to, but I know what she's going to do. She's going to say, here's your coloring book. Here's a cookie.
Off you go.
Off you go. And pretty soon she goes, well, I'm not even going to make any noise now because I know what she's going to do. And guess what? I might not even like that, but then I do like my coloring book and I do like the cookie. So
That is a nice cookie.
that is a nice cookie. So then she learns it's safe for her. She's not saying it's not safe for you. She's saying it's not safe for her.
Mm-hmm.
Question.
Yeah.
Is this a containers thing? Like you're giving like the inner child is gonna test you because they don't feel safe. There's no container. So then you give them a container and they go, oh, maybe I am safe, and they kind of like calm down.
Yeah. Yes. The container of safety in this case is there is a grown-up who will manage what I'm afraid of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, and that's great when you're in the world of, oh, it's my inner child and let me go address my inner child. But when it comes time to post your workshop or whatever it is, there's that trick of merging again, right? So that when because you're not conscious that it's the inner child. What you're conscious of is what it feels like to be afraid.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So to say, oh, this is my inner child, great. So you've taken that step. But those feelings are going to come, until they don't, but they're going to come. And so you just know that they are, and you know how to handle them.
Mm-hmm.
Whether yeah, go ahead.
What I've been noticing is that I've been jumping too far as well. And so it's like there's the safety in practicing something and repetition, right? And so partly it's been like I've been putting myself in front of 5,000 people instead of just putting myself in front of one, and practicing in front of, I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's like I haven't been practicing in a way that is, I haven't been safe for her. There you go. I mean, if you, there you go. If you really want to, the truth of the matter, I'm realizing now is I am putting both of us in a situation that I really should not have been doing. There's a much safer way for me to have been doing it, which is what I have been shifting toward doing, which doesn't feel right though, right? Like, why am I running a workshop for two people, right? Like, why am I running a workshop for, but I realize that I need to do that to get the muscle memory of this is safe, this is okay, right?
Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
I just picked up a thought about what you might do, because you said, you're not practicing in front of 1,000 people, you're practicing in front of 2 people, but you want to build up the muscle memory. Please, if I'm about to say something stupid, you let me know and we'll walk back from it, right? But those 2 people are still adversaries. What I would do if I were you in that circumstance, which I'm not, so it's a different circumstance, but what I would do in that circumstance is go to a crowd of 1,000 people to some degree and say, they don't have to love me. Can I think of one nice thing that I would say to any or all of them?
Right.
And then it's not about a hostile world that you've been left out of as the only caring person. It's a hostile world that's going to love you for the caring person that you are.
Yeah.
I just thought of that. That's I say that.
Yeah, it's a cognitive shift in terms of how you're viewing the world. Yeah.
Right.
One of my favorite jokes that I like to say is, I am a performer and I'm a ham on stage, and I can't believe I actually do say this, but I do. I say, if ever I feel, some people say, if ever you feel nervous, imagine that the audience is naked and then you feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And what I say is, whenever I feel nervous, I imagine myself to be naked and they're all dealing with it, and makes me feel fundamentally very relaxed.
That's hilarious. Little
Yeah.
spin on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But to
Yeah.
your point, Lorena, too, is yes, you know, especially when you're an entrepreneur in a healing field and there's a lot of pressure from the outside to fill your class with 1,000 people, or, you know, a
And
multi-thousand dollar excursion. The truth is, and we talked about this before, but it really helps to remember why we do what we do. And if you can help one of those two people or both of them who do actually sign up, that is a
yeah.
tremendous change in the quantum field.
No, I understand all of that. It's literally a safety thing. It's literally a touching the hot stove thing,
Mm.
right? And so it's like I know what I have to offer is wonderful. I feel invigorated when I do it. I know how much people appreciate it and enjoy it. It's that I'm not allowing myself enough time to, there's a middle ground, right? And I feel like what I'm doing is when you go swimming, you need to learn to swim first in the shallow end. And what I'm feeling and what I'm seeing is that in these last few months is I'm continually, and maybe that's the sabotaging thing. I keep throwing myself into the deep end. And then it's a really panicky, scary experience where things aren't going the way I want them to go. And so then I get out of the pool completely instead of moving back to the shallow end and saying, let's just stay in the shallow end for a bit until we feel better about this.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think that's a fantastic analogy.
Yeah.
And I guess what I was getting at a moment ago is, like, where are we getting the message that we have to jump into the deep end?
I wanted to say something to that.
Oh.
Are you convincing yourself that maybe you should give this up?
No, this is this is so much a part of who I am. I could give up breathing before I gave up this.
Right.
But
Hold
what was
on
your
to that.
question again,
Yeah.
Rachel?
Hold on to that.
So the idea here is, where is the message coming from? Whether it's something from your childhood or something that's current in society or whatever, that we have to prove ourselves by jumping directly into the deep end. And
It's supporting myself.
okay.
It's all about money and it's all about supporting myself, even though that's irrational, right? And so that's kind of, and maybe we can talk about this in terms of doing one-on-one and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
that's a thread I need to trace. And
Yes.
it's I do not need to look after myself, and yet I need to look after myself. So there's this
Right.
duality going on in terms of my world and supporting myself that is pushing me to do things that I should not be doing.
Right. So
basically.
that's something to sit with the inner child too, because she's afraid of lack.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a great one to sit with.
And my stomach is so tense right now.
Yeah.
Oh.
Just drop into that and just feel it. Just let it be. Don't try to move it. Just noticing it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, there's more there. There's more there.
Yeah.
So whether you do that on your own or you know, one-on-one, that's something that would be really worth looking at for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because
that it's the fear of annihilation.
Yeah.
And that's a primal fear we all hold. It just manifests itself in different ways. Just a minute, Dave.
I know.
That
When I think of something, I just put that, not immediately, just when I think of it.
the that's the part, and as I said, it manifests in different ways. It might be financial, it might be uh an image-based thing, like not career for money reasons, but for status. You know, it might be the fear of annihilation if I'm not pair bonded with someone, you know, whatever. It's different for everybody. So that is a really worthy fear to sit with, and it's hard. I liken it to trying to sit on the bottom of a swimming pool.
Yeah.
You know, it's really
Good
hard to stay down
analogy.
there. Yeah, it's like, and you just, I don't want to be here, you know, but to force yourself to sit in there, then it really does help. And that's what a lot of us spend a lot of our time trying to avoid doing, is sitting with that fear of this existential terror, you know. Like if it's it for you in this case, it's a financial thing. I must, you know, there's scarcity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
Go ahead, Dave.
Um, Something that occurred to me as we were speaking just now was something from that I learned in my research in my own spiritual practice, and again, it's coming from a guy named Dave wearing a bunny hat, so it's only as useful as it is. But uh, I heard once on the grapevine that if you were not capable of something, it would never enter your consciousness that that thing existed at all, because you wouldn't have any of that frequency inside of you. So the fact that you have
Right.
this dream and you have this passion and you have this movement toward it is the promise, I would say, from the universe that it is already yours. And so
Mm-hmm.
instead of the fear of annihilation, and you're looking into the dark, so all you're seeing is the dark, but I just want to tap you on the shoulder, look the other way, and say, listen, if that mountain didn't belong to you, you wouldn't have noticed it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
So
that's,
if
yeah,
you're going to
that's
have the fear of
certainly.
annihilation, the hope that you have capacity should be in the other pocket.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right, but
Yeah.
yeah, so yes, and the annihilation fear has to be dealt with, though.
Yes,
So
and
yeah,
very much
yes,
so, very
yes,
much so.
and
But don't
yeah.
don't let the annihilation blot out your
Right.
morning.
It's causing ambivalence. That's the problem,
Right,
right?
right,
And so
right.
there's this ambivalence
This.
between that being fully anchored in what my calling is and what I have to offer in such
Yes.
there's zero imposter syndrome. Like it is just me, it is who
Good,
I
good,
am.
good.
I feel so anchored in that.
Yeah,
But then there's this weirdness, it's weirdness on the other side that's playing out
yeah,
that's
yeah.
causing that kind of that existential that existential guck to poke in.
Right, and
As
don't forget that it's part of collective consciousness as well. Not all of it belongs to you personally. It's
Okay.
like, or the collective unconscious, actually, because we're not always aware of it. You know, that's part of what's going on in the world today, is extreme terror, and anxiety, and a massive amount of distraction, so that we don't have to sit with that. So
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Listen, I have about 1 minute left. Unfortunately, I have to cut a little bit short today.
Okay.
But final thoughts, or until we meet again on Tuesday?
um I love my inner child, and I think that it's just going to be an ongoing adventure from here. And Lorena, of what we've said before, you must be the most powerful soul I have ever met, to come in with so much light and embody so much darkness and turn toward the light again. People talk about meeting Jesus. I met Lorena, okay? Come on. Come on.
Well, we can all thank Rachel for it.
You
pretty,
guys, you guys.
pretty powerful stuff. Like
Yeah,
it's
it's
just
beautiful.
this
And
is incredible.
and
Yeah.
I commend you both for the work that you're doing. And this is for you, and for all the people that you touch energetically throughout your life. So But we're going to meet again on Tuesday. So
Yay.
we'll talk about how to keep this going, right? Even though
Okay.
you guys are well on your way, it's worth spending some time kind of locking that in. So it'll be a good
Incredibly
final,
helpful.
good
So
final
helpful.
ceremony we will have.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you both. We'll see you
Thank
then.
Thank you.
you. See you
Bye.
next week, guys. Bye.
See you next week.